I have a song I love to sing, since I have been redeemed of my Redeemer, Savior, King, since I have been redeemed.
Welcome back to Bible Talks. I'm Chris Kramer with the Northside Church of Christ in Russellville, Kentucky. Just do a Google search or Yahoo search, whatever search engine that you might use, and type in Northside Church of Christ, Russellville, Kentucky. You'll find us on the websites. We have links to our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and many other resources that you can use to know a little bit more about us, and links that you can click on for further Bible study as well. And through any of these means, you can contact us through Messenger on Facebook. You can put a comment on our YouTube channel. You can email us, northsidechurchofchrist@hotmail.com, and put your question or comment in detail, a little bit about who you are, and we'd love to contact you and to study God's Word with you. And if you have any questions or comments about this program or any others, feel free to ask. We want to be open about the Bible and discuss Bible things. For our program over the next couple of weeks, I'd like to discuss two different aspects of something that's very prevalent in human nature, and that is the problem of anger. Anger is something that the Bible does not outright condemn, but conditionally in regard to how we, express our anger, is what the Bible shows us that we must use self-control. Self-control is it's one of the characteristics of the Bible that gives us really the basis of how we deal with anything in life. And the majority of the letters that you read, especially in the New Testament, a basic theme throughout those letters is self-control. Yes, we need to be servants of Christ, and we need to do His will, but there's also plenty that teaches us things that we should not be doing. And there is a restrictive nature, if you will, which a lot of people have a hard time accepting in our world and society today, where men basically just want to do what they want to do, and they don't want to be told to modify their thinking or to live by a particular code or standard. And of course, that attributes us to why we have so many problems in the world today. That's a rebellion against God. Because when you look at the ideas of atheism or humanism, and you see that their attitudes are typically, let's remove God from every aspect of life. And if you remove God, then the only thing that you have left is darkness and evil. And so people like to, get on the bandwagon of being angry against God, but yet they want to find joy and happiness in the world. You just can't do it. It's not a possibility. It's just not something that can even happen on its own. And when we look at what the Bible has to say about anger, let's just look at a few Bible verses today and ask ourselves the question, what direction is God pointing us in? And what He's trying to do is to teach us to have self-control, to control our anger. As I said a few moments ago, the emotion of anger is sometimes going to arise. When you look at the majority of the verses in the Bible about anger, a lot of times they're about God and His wrath upon those that rebel against Him. But we'll study about that next time. Today I want to look at human anger. And beginning in Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 1, the Bible simply says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." So it's kind of like one of those things, anger begets anger. It's not a fire fights fire kind of thing. Anytime that we're angry, toward anger or toward sin or whatever it might be, or for no reason whatsoever, as the Bible also talks about, Jesus says, don't be angry with your brother without cause. And so He puts that little caveat in there that, sometimes there's a reason to be angry. But the question is, how am I going to respond? I may feel that anger or disappointment in my heart, but am I trying to just be a problem solver here, or am I trying to stir up more anger? There's a term that we sometimes use when it's people that like to stir up problems and anger. They like to poke the bear, as you might say, and don't arouse the sleeping beast. It just brings about anger, and anger begets anger. And that's just the ironic thing about this particular topic. We get angry at people that get angry. We don't want to be the recipients of someone's anger. And I guess that's really what it comes down to. We feel that we're justified to be angry about what we don't like, but God forbid that somebody would be angry toward us, because we take offense to the fact that somebody is judging us for, well, wrong, or that we're wrong. And that's very prevalent in our society today. There's a term in the social media world called trolling, and I'm sure you've heard of it. And sometimes, people are guilty of just trying to stir the pot, you might say. They want to get out there and say things that are going to spark a discussion. Not a good discussion, but a hateful one. They want to spark anger in people. And sometimes, as the old saying goes, sometimes people just like to watch the world burn. They like to poke the bear and then see what's going to happen. And they sit back and get a kick out of the fallout. And of course, that's just a weirdness and kind of a sick-minded idea that people do have, especially in the world of social media. But what we're talking about here is that we need to be careful with our words. And that's what Proverbs 15 and verse 1 teaches us, to use a soft answer. And how do we do that? Well, we have to build particular characteristics and habits in ourselves so that we can learn to control our anger. And I'm sure you've heard of a few in your lifetime. I mean, the old classic, stop and count to 10, stop and breathe. And of course, the favorite that nobody likes to hear is, you need to calm down. Nobody likes to be told that, but yet those are things that help us control our anger. Maybe your anger is justified, but does that mean that we act like angry people? I've always tried to say that there's a distinction between being angry about something or just being an angry person. And there are some people that are just so pent up with anger in their lives. They're angry about everything. They just live in a constant state of negativity. They can't find any joy in life. And obviously there are some things that are sorely lacking there. But a soft answer turns away wrath. So how do I have this soft answer? How do I avoid the harsh words? Well, it helps us in our lives to, use a vocabulary that's decent. We live in a world today where people use profanity like it's a bag of potato chips. And that's really sad, because people feel justified. I like to watch TV programming that doesn't have cursing and swearing and things like that. But, they get through. We hear them. But when do our conscience become so seared that they just don't bother us anymore? Sin should bother us. It doesn't mean that we cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. We can't do that. 1 Corinthians 5 is very clear that we cannot, shun the world. We have a responsibility toward those who partake in sin, and we don't want that as being prevalent in our lives. But if we never wanted to hear the harsh words, well, we would never be able to turn on the news. We'd never be able to walk down the street, much less shop in a grocery store. You'll hear these things in daily living. But again, the lesson is about control. How do I control how I feel about these things? We're not saying be apathetic. In other words, don't just be so beat down over anger that you just don't care anymore. You don't want to say anything anymore. Part of our responsibilities as Christians is to shine a light in a dark world, which means that sometimes we must rebuke, we must correct. We need to ask people, hey, can you not use that language around me? Or, hey, can you, stop and think about what you're doing before you say it? Or just, the old classic, hey, why are you so mad? I mean, they make T-shirts that say, "You mad, bro?" Have you seen those? And it's just true, because so many times people are just walking around mad. And why is that? There's always going to be sin, as the Lord has said. There are always going to be things in this life that won't make us happy. And we can't expect this world to just jump on the bandwagon of God and goodness and godliness. That's the way we'd like it to be. And that's the way God would like it to be. But he gives man his own free will, but he says, heaven is a place on earth. Heaven is not what we're looking for while we're here in this place. It's the place that we will go to someday, where every tear shall be wiped away, where you're not going to hear bad language. You're not going to see anger from men. You're not going to see fighting over in the corner of heaven. Those people, they're not going there. That's not going to be a place for them. And let me tell you something. They're going to be pretty angry about where they end up. So if you don't want to be angry in the afterlife, then quit being so angry now. Learn control. In Psalm chapter 30 and verse 5, this is talking about God's patience. And though I said we'll look at God in another lesson, it's important to note that he is our primary example for anger. Remember, God, he has that characteristic. We are made in his image. He gives us the right to be angry about things, but it says his anger is but for a moment. His favor is for life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And of course, we're familiar with classic passages like be angry and do not sin, do not let the sun go down in your wrath, Ephesians 4:26. And in these things, we find that we need to have something good to look forward to. Yeah, there are things that we can be angry about in life, but instead of dwelling on and focusing on those things that make you so angry, why don't you distance yourself from those situations? Why don't you find a better reason to go out and find some happiness? Sometimes we just need to do simple things to, as I said before, calm down. And what's that going to be? You could have looked out your window the past couple days and seen some of the rain coming down. And that could have made you a little angry, you might say. Well, I've got things to do. I've got to mow my grass. I've got a picnic to go to. I've got to get out there. And I remember going down to my garage, opening the door, and just listening to the falling rain hitting the leaves on the trees. And there was a tranquility. There was a peace to that. And we all need certain moments in time to look at something that might make you angry and say, where can I find peace in this situation as well? You don't have to be a part of every situation that's going on in the world. As I said before, you turn on the news, what are you going to hear? You're going to hear things to be angry about. You have the choice as to whether or not you want to turn on the news. Don't think it's your big responsibility in life that you have to know everything that's going on in the world. You don't have to know everything that's going on in Washington. You don't have to know everything that's going on at the border. You don't have to know everything that's going on overseas and in foreign lands and foreign policies and whatever it might be that people constantly just put into their minds. And because they never escape those kinds of things with messages of good and soft words, you might say, that it just starts to run through their mind constantly. It becomes a part of who they are, because we are what we partake of. We are what we think constantly, and as a man thinks, so is he. So what are we putting into our minds? We need to consider the source. And so remember that God's anger is for a moment, but then he makes provision to overcome that anger. He makes provision to help people out of these bad states. You look at the many times that the Bible talks about God's wrath, he then always shows his mercy. He shows a perseverance there. He shows a plan to overcome the very things that upsets him. And that's what we need to do as well. We need to find that plan. Of course, the best laid plans is in God and doing his will. It's not about being a goody two-shoes or just about having your head in the clouds and thinking of rainbows all the time. It's a matter of solving problems and working toward that purpose so that there can be an end goal and bring joy and happiness to all. Let's consider one of the other passages that I mentioned just a few moments ago, and that's Ephesians 4:26 through 27. Be angry and do not sin. The Bible doesn't say here, don't be angry. But it says, don't let sin be a result of your anger. It says you need to handle this thing. And of course, many times we look at the next passage in this verse and just conclude that it means to handle your problem, quickly. And I would agree with that. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. But, I'll often look at this passage too as being a matter of an end. When we say the sun has set, sometimes we use that as an expression as something coming to an end. Have you ever got into an argument or found so much anger that you have with somebody that you just ended that relationship, that it did not end well. And, you really hate to end any kind of situation on a bad note. And I think that this might be leaning toward that as well. That's something I learned from it. When I think about not letting the sun go down on your wrath, there is the practical side of, handle it. I mean, don't go to bed angry. Don't dwell on it all night long. But remember, Psalm chapter 30 and verse 5 doesn't contradict that when it says, weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. Sometimes you have to remove yourself from a bad situation. Say, you know what? I need to pray about this. I need to think on this. I need to, contemplate it through the night so that I can have a new and fresh perspective the next day. So there's the practicality of all that. And that's just based on the given situation. So in Ephesians 4:26, going back to my previous point, maybe this could also mean, hey, don't let it end like this. Don't let it end bad. And then it says, nor give place to the devil. And I think that's the big thing right there. Don't let the devil in and give him that opportunity. That sin will arise in your heart, in your life, with a hatred. Ephesians 4:26 through 27 says, be angry and do not sin. And if we took out that middle part and says, do not sin nor give place to the devil, that's exactly how we sin, because we're letting the devil in, you see. And so the Lord gives us practical ways in order to overcome these things. Let's look at a few of these things. Let's look at the end result. Number one, you've rid yourself of the devil, okay? You've enacted self-control. Proverbs 16 and verse 32 talks about that self-control that we've been mentioning since the beginning of the program. He says, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. We have that control. And how do we do that? We need to look at the practical lessons of what the Bible teaches us. Proverbs 29 and verse 11 says, a fool vents all his feelings, but a wise man holds them back. A wise man knows when to, we like to use the expression, bite his tongue, you might say. A wise man knows when to remove himself from a bad situation. It doesn't mean that the wise man never gets angry about something. It just means there are just some things that are just not worth the fight. There are some things that are not worth your opinion. There are some things that you don't have to get yourself embroiled in the middle of, because in a lot of cases, it's none of your business. And if we just have that attitude in our own minds about ourselves and get over our own arrogance, maybe we won't get so wrapped up in being angry about what's going on in the world around us. Because that's not the way I'm going to live. I can sometimes get angry with the sin that I see in the world, but you know what Jesus did when he saw sin in the world? He wept over it, and he gave his life for it. So it wasn't necessarily about being angry about what everyone was doing, but it was about seeking an answer. What can I do to help the situation? And the more that we show love, and the more that we show the soft answer, you'll find that that's contagious too. Anger, it has more of a contagion that's kind of a quick, knee-jerk reaction. But the other, requires thought. It requires contemplation. To have a soft answer, to have, to rid yourself of this feeling of anger, it's going to take a bit of meditation. It takes a little bit of time. It takes counting to 10. A flash of anger doesn't take any time at all. So what do we want to have ruling over us? Do we want to have self-control and to be able to stand up like strong people and say, okay, I can handle this, and I can be cool, in other words. Sometimes we just got to be cool. And I don't mean that in a cool macho kind of way. I'm saying that in a way that, it used to be said that you just got to chill. You've got to sit back and you've got to relax and you've got to just, let this thing play out and understand that maybe this isn't your fight. Maybe this isn't what you have to be upset about. Whatever, you might be upset about in your mind and in your world right now, ask yourself, is it really my business? Do I really have to, care? And yeah, we want to care about everything. I get that. And I get the fact that we want to bring people to the Lord and we care about people's souls. But we shouldn't just write them off as well and say, well, I don't care what happens to him, or I don't care what happens in this given situation. We need to care. But being angry about it is not going to help that matter. In Ephesians 6 and verse 4, we're taught to behave godly, just like in the raising of our children. That's where a true test of patience for a lot of people comes into play sometimes. And it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." This doesn't mean that you're not going to make them angry and that they're not going to get upset with your rules sometimes, but you're training them in the admonition of the Lord. Let's not press them into anger. Let's not put them into a wrathful state where they will one day reap the wrath of God as well. And let's not provoke them. Let's not push the buttons, you might say, or poke the bear, as I mentioned earlier. Let's not put ourselves in a position where we are trying to antagonize somebody to the point of submission, but that we're trying to show love and patience and show somebody a better way. In James chapter 1 and verse 19, a good principle to live by is to think before you speak. I'm sure you've heard that phrase before, but he says, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." That's how it happens. When we stop, and of course the old saying is, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to listen twice as much as we talk. And in regard to that, he's basically saying, be swift to hear. Stop and listen. The only way that you're going to hear is when you're not too busy trying to give an answer. Some things can't be reasoned. Some people can't be reasoned with. And sometimes the best thing that you can do is listen. And the slower you are to react, then the slower you are to show wrath or anger. And perhaps by the end of a conversation or situation, you might just find, this isn't really worth the fight. I don't have to get upset or bent out of shape by these things. Show a little bit of kindness, and I believe people will show some kindness in return. I go to restaurants, and they'll mess up my order. Happens quite a bit. And I can go up to the counter, and I can slam my fist on the counter and say, "You messed up my order. Make it right." And they might make it right, but they're not going to be real happy with me. But if I go to them and say, "Hey, I noticed my order was a little wrong. I just want to make you aware of it." Be kind, give them the facts. Don't be mad about it. Don't get them bent out of shape. More than likely, they're going to be apologetic. They're going to do what they can to help you out, and they're going to fix the situation. And everybody's a lot calmer because of it. But if you want to lash out in anger, you're going to get anger in return. That's one thing that will always come back to you, because anger is a boomerang. And a lot of people don't know how to throw a boomerang. But one thing about anger is it will always come back to you. A couple things to consider before we close the lesson today is, of course, the ultimate overcoming of anger, and that's found in love. Consider 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 5. It says, "Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil." These are the things that show us the ultimate control over anger. And so I think a lot of times when you see somebody that's just constantly angry, they've got a love problem, and they need to work that out in their heart and in their lives. In Hebrews chapter 13, verses 1 through 2, not only is it a command, but he says, "Let brotherly love continue. Don't forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing some have unwittingly entertained angels." And if you think about it, what if you lashed out in anger and you turned around and realized there's the Lord standing right behind you? That's something to think about. And if we can help you with these things, let us know. We want to talk rationally and reasonably with, not in anger, over what you need to do to make changes in your life to become a Christian. And if you're seeking the answer to those things, how can we help? Please reach out to us. The Northside Church of Christ meets in Russellville, Kentucky at 689 North Main Street. Come and be with us. And I think what you'll see there is love of the brethren. Let's encourage one another. Let's help one another. And let's get to heaven with a smile on our face. Thank you for listening this morning. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on Bible Talks.
Since I have been redeemed, since I have been redeemed, I will glory in his name. Since I have been redeemed, I will glory in my Savior's name.